Welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Lynn, and today I'm really grateful to have on Jessica Phillips. Jessica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here.
Yes, we had the chance to meet in New York because you graciously, spontaneously agreed to meet me. I reached out to you because, among other things, you teach entrepreneurship at Juilliard. You're also with a clarinettist with the Met Orchestra. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience, and we'll start from there.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I love the Fearless Artist podcast. I think you all are doing such an amazing job bringing some of these great issues to the musician mind. Um, I have a little bit of a different journey to where I am today. I went to Barnard College, which is a part of Columbia University. I actually live 5 blocks away now. So I'm kind of in my old college neighborhood, and I did a joint program with Manhattan School of Music. And then after that, I started freelancing in New York City for a couple of years and ended up winning the job at the Met, which is a completely blind audition process. So I
Wow.
was pretty young, 24, and so I've been at the Met now for over 25 years. So you can guess my age from that.
You do not look your age, that's for sure.
Thank you. And I've done a couple of things. I've led to negotiations at the Met, and then I went back and got my MBA kind of post COVID or during COVID. I wanted to explore some other avenues, and so I ended up teaching at Juilliard. Now I have a full year course there, two sections of that course. Actually, it's really popular now.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
yeah, which is awesome, and it's the students, they want it. So yeah, I think that's it for me now. I don't know. We can keep talking.
That's a lot. That's a lot. It's very impressive. I love the impact that you're making in multiple areas. I know we had talked in New York that you were on a board, right? Is that with the orchestra?
No, I'm actually on the board of a member services organization. So in the US, nonprofits are something that you can become through the IRS, our tax, agency. I think you have a lot of international listeners, so I'll try not
We
to,
do. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I don't want to assume US nonprofit knowledge here, but it's a fiscal sponsor is a way that individuals or string quartets or dancers or actors can take on nonprofit status through this member services organization. And so I'm on the board of the Field, which is one of those organizations. So we help all kinds of, artists take tax deductible donations and raise money, and we help upskill them, do a lot of professional development, career services for them there. So I'm on the board there, and I'm on the board of the League of American Orchestras, which is
Okay.
kind of a U.S. advocacy organization for orchestras that does all kinds of, education, advocacy through one of the things that we've been working on is the Pernambuco wood. So all the bows, so traveling, with that wood, we've had our incredible advocate in Washington, D.C., Heather Noonan. She's gone to Brazil to advocate for musicians and that wood and traveling with it. We're not part of the problem. So yeah, that's just one of the things that we do there.
That's amazing. Yeah, like I said, you're having an impact in so many different areas in the industry, but you've maintained your job as a clarinetist in the orchestra. Can you talk a bit about how you had not just the time, but the energy, the space, the mental space to take on so many other roles and what that looks like? And we talk a lot about portfolio careers, but this is, yeah, a little bit beyond, I think.
I think it's funny. I am actually an introvert,
Okay.
and I guess I'm what they call an extroverted introvert. And my husband, an introverted extrovert. So we talk a lot about energy,
Mm,
and I think that when you do the things that give you joy and give you satisfaction and you feel like you're helping make the world a better place, that really drives my energy. And so I
hmm.
have a lot of energy for it. I don't need, to come back and like recharge my battery so much. So these things are that I do are all kind of in line with my personal mission. and therefore are incredibly fulfilling and appeal to my sense of curiosity of how things work and my sort of collaborative nature. I find myself a cross aisle translator a lot, meaning this is what musicians mean when they say this, and this is what
Right.
management means when they say this. And that kind of cross aisle shuttle diplomacy is something I find really fascinating. Sort of draws on my college days when I was a political science major. And, so I do love that sort of those subjects and topics. So it gives me a
Mm.
lot of joy. I think that gives you the
Hmm.
energy to do all those things.
Yeah, that's a great answer because more and more, like through the podcast as well, I've met a lot of high capacity people, a lot of people having large roles in a number of different areas. And so it's great to hear how you're thinking about these things because we are limited in a sense, but it sounds like a very full and rich life in a lot of capacities. What was one of the first things that you added past the performance career?
The first thing I did was sort of step into the orchestra committee, which is something I think not a lot of people understand about orchestras, is that there's usually an orchestra committee, and that orchestra is sort of tasked with the not only governing the orchestra itself, but also negotiating on the orchestra's behalf. And so much of that knowledge is passed down from colleague to colleague, from generation to generation. So I joined and learned a ton about, labor law and, bylaws and, our orchestra and the history of our negotiations and our contracts for a couple of years. And then I sort of got thrust into the role of the chair. At the last minute, which, is a whole other story, but I don't think I ever would have thought of myself in that way, but there just was nobody else there to do it at the time. I took that on, and it was the first negotiation that I did was extremely contentious at the Met. And then the second one in 2018 was collaborative. We did a lot of interest based bargaining, which is sort of a methodology, a lot of transparency and collaboration to get to that second negotiation, which kind of made me interested in negotiation tactics. And, so then I went to Harvard to learn more about negotiation processes and just kind of, I think one of my personality traits is just like lifelong learning. So if I don't know
Mm,
something, I want to like know more about it. So I really spent a lot of time I had all of these instincts as a leader, but I didn't know why. And so
mm,
I kind of went back to school, got these certificates and my MBA in arts innovation and entrepreneurship. And that sort of gave me all the theory behind my instincts as a leader for both failures and successes. So
wow.
it was a really interesting time. I think it made me feel more confident as a teacher too,
Mm, mm-hmm.
because when I came out into the industry, the landscape is very different than what my students who are graduate students now are facing. So I really wanted to understand the foundational frameworks of business to teach them rather than like, here's what you have to do, this like kind of prescriptive attitude, I think that I got when I was coming out of school. And so I
So
want to
interesting.
equip them with tools. Not, I don't want them to be like, we do a negotiation simulation, we do all kinds of things in my class, but it's all experiential learning, which sort of is the theory of adult learning, is that you really need to do it. You need to do it to
Right.
learn it. And so that's my focus in my teaching, but I kind of got that in my own learning after I kind of left the committee role in the orchestra. So that was sort of my mind journey there.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. There's so many elements here that I like to unpack. What's something that you learned about negotiation? You said you did an MBA at Harvard, right?
Well, I know
That,
I did my MBA at the Global Leaders Institute,
oh, right.
which
Okay.
is
Yeah.
really arts specific. Harvard has Harvard Kennedy School, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Business School all offer like certificates in specific learning modules. So
Yeah.
3 at Harvard Law School on negotiation.
Okay. Okay, amazing. Actually, I was just looking up the Harvard Business School one on entrepreneurship 2 days ago because
Hmm.
somebody in our community is interested in that. So I knew about that. So coming back to the negotiations, what was something that you learned that you thought every musician needs to know this, but we don't receive this training?
You can get this in Getting to Yes, the book, the kind of seminal work by Roger Fisher and William Ury. But musicians tend to think in positions, and they call that positional bargaining. And the kind of the thought of instead thinking about interests is a way to bargain and think about getting away from the scarcity mindset that I think we all have in the nonprofits and the arts, at least in this country, and thinking about how we can work together to actually make the pie bigger, make
Oh, that's
value.
good. Yeah.
So that is something I really wish every musician understood, because the theory, and I could go into it, but the theory is that over time collaborative negotiations create more value for everyone. So I think we tend to get this really contentious negotiation atmosphere in many orchestras in this country, and it just doesn't serve any side in the long run. So
That's amazing. So when you
yeah.
say positional, that's really like us versus them, that kind of positioning.
Yeah, exactly. And an interest is like, we want a wage increase. We want to attract and retain the best musicians, to our orchestra. That might take the form of, several different kinds of things. Whereas a position might be like, we need to get, 15% wage
Mm,
increase, and we are not willing to talk about anything else. And so that's a position instead of an interest in getting that 15%, but how is the organization going to do that? And how can they do that? Sometimes what I experienced in 2018, for example, is that healthcare is very expensive in this country. And so by taking on a small percentage of the healthcare costs for each musician, that saved the Met an outsized amount of value. And so that's an example of just creating a tremendous amount of value without us, the musicians, giving up something tit for tat, kind of.
mm, What stops musicians from thinking in this bigger picture, make the pie bigger, and keeps us stuck in this, as you say, scarcity mindset?
I think that these stories, these sort of entrenched systems, if you will, power hierarchies, they're very sticky. They linger on. You said, us versus them. Those kinds of things linger and become part of the collective, mind meld, because we tell them as stories and we
Mm,
accept them as true. And that emotional reaction to stories is something we know scientifically, like that, when I tell you a story, we're neurally coupled, we're entrained, our brains are, lighting up in the same way. And so that's kind of the science of the stickiness. And so, conservatories, higher music, elite music education across this country, we stand on the shoulders of tradition, and there's a lot of fear about innovating. We
mm.
don't want to alienate our traditions. So we keep telling the same stories, and they're very sticky. So I think we don't teach musicians that this is something they need to know. We just say, go to the practice room and practice, 10,000 hours, which has been debunked, and you'll be fine. You'll be great. And the reality is that most musicians do need to become entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call it, that at some point in their life, they need to have business skills. They need to know how to negotiate. They need to know how to collaborate. They need group dynamic theory. They need to know how to work with other people. And that's not really something we teach in conservatories and higher music education. I think it's changing. I hope it's
I
changing.
know you're part of that change. Yeah, exactly. Which is why I was thrilled to learn about your curriculum that you had shared with me. Going back to what you shared about you were kind of taught a formula and instead you're giving your students tools or business foundations. Can you talk about the contrast between maybe also what I learned in school versus what you're now carrying into the next generation of musicians?
Yeah. I was very lucky. I mean, I think anybody who wants to pursue art is lucky. They're privileged in some way. Somebody has helped them get there, right? They have a
Yeah.
network and they have a support system. And all of my early work was through somebody who my teacher had a connection to. Said, "Oh, she's good." They spoke for me, and so
Mm,
that's what I call relational capital. Somebody said, "Oh, she can do it. She's learning, but give her a shot." And there's just all of those gigs that I did early on in my career. Some of those groups don't exist anymore.
mm,
And that sort of relational capital still is necessary, but you may have to do more to get it and to work for it. Or a lot of musicians leave the city and they go somewhere new. And so they don't have those systems of support already built in. So learning how to network, learning how to speak for themselves, learning how to pitch an idea, learning how to solve a problem, learning how to see that even though we're very privileged to be artists, our communities and our society needs artists to be
mm.
healthy. And so we provide a service that is integral to our communities. So kind of flipping the narrative of like, oh, you're so lucky to get to do what you love. That we hear at Thanksgiving every year.
Oh man, how many times have we heard that?
Right. And
Yeah.
I've worked a long time to be able to hone my craft and to do what I do. And the reality is that nobody can do the things that art can do in terms of healing or, any of these community-based social prescriptions that we're kind of starting to talk about in the arts. Only artists can do that, right? Only we can deliver that learning and that healing. And so part of it is just empowering the students to understand that they have a valuable service. It's not totally just selfish what they want to do with
Yes.
their lives. I think
Yeah,
they get
thank you for
that
saying that. I
some.
would love for you to expand on that because I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, I don't know where that
We're
comes
currently,
from.
yeah, because it's about us. I think that's the lie that's getting twisted in there. Because I have to talk about me to tell you to come to my concert, so it's selfish somehow. That's what I've
Yeah,
heard from people.
yeah. And we were just having this discussion in my class yesterday, actually. Like I try to get them to think about what is their unique differentiator or their unique value proposition. And some of them are like get it, know what it is for themselves right away. And some are completely paralyzed by that. And and so we talked about what are some examples of that and what marketing research surveys tell us, at least in this country, is that some of our audiences love new things. Some of our audiences want to hear Beethoven over and over again. Wonderful, right? Those are both wonderful audience members. And so it's about kind of knowing where there's a product market fit. And so I
Right.
speak in these business terms with them to get them to understand you need to know your audience.
Yeah.
And if you're, you know, playing Beethoven all the time and your audience is really like a sort of infotainment group where they want to learn something new, then maybe you want to put some Webern in there. And then people go, oh, that's so interesting. I never thought of that pairing before.
Mm.
And if you're
Hmm.
an edutainment attractor, then maybe you'll put something fun or you'll play. One of my students loves to use there's a clarinet piece from the movie The Terminal, and it's a wonderful little. She uses it as an encore actually, and people
Oh, fun.
recognize it, and so it's like that's edutainment. They love that. It's
Right.
entertaining, and it's interesting to see something modern and relevant put next to Beethoven. and people feel, oh, it's relevant. Classical music is relevant if you still even call it classical music, So they start to kind of see, oh, actually, yeah, there's how would I think about a recital or a concert or a product. I think with musicians, we don't, nobody has CDs anymore. So we don't have like a piece of art that we're handing you, not like an artist. So there's no product. They don't always think of themselves as a product. And so that's what we try to do. We try to kind of put them in those situations. Um, and then also kind of think about what problem are you solving?
This is so good.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, and it's a little bit Clay Christensen, milkshake marketing, if you're familiar with that. And but yeah, what problem are you trying to solve, and make no assumptions about your customers. So the milkshake marketing theory is that McDonald's has this milkshake, and they didn't really, I'm giving you the very, very brief version, so please nobody at home kind of go, oh my God, she doesn't have this right. Um, but the very brief story is that they didn't really understand. They wanted to understand more about why people were buying milkshakes, and what they found through a lot of marketing research surveys, that people were actually buying milkshakes for breakfast because they were
Oh,
driving to work, and so it
I think
solved a
I've heard
problem
this.
from them. Yeah,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
they could drive and drink this for breakfast, and I don't know anything about the nutrition of that,
I'm just thinking
the
the sugar
sugar
high.
content.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of idea, is that like, what problem are you solving? And it could be that people just want more joy in their lives. That's a wonderful
Mm,
problem to solve. That's great.
right.
So it's thinking about these tools and these business tools to kind of then make more informed decisions. And I don't expect any of my students to feel like they have an MBA. I expect them to kind of say, I know what I don't know, instead of I don't know what I don't even know.
Yes. And those are the four phases of learning, right? So
Yes.
complete ignorance. Don't know what I don't know. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Love that. How receptive are they to specifically the business jargon that you're bringing in? And I mean, I really appreciate it because I think it helps musicians to realize like there are other worlds out there than ours, and we should use the language of the world if you want to come into these collaborations or negotiations or looking for corporate sponsorship. It would be helpful to speak the language of the people that we're speaking with.
Yeah. I think that um, the feedback that the students have for me, and I stay in touch with a lot of my students. Like, I've been teaching for 5 years now, and a lot of them say, "Oh, I got this job, and I can you help me look at this contract, and how should I do this?" And I always tell them, you're once you've been in my class and you've had to listen to me talk for as long as you all have had to listen to me talk, you are part of my family, and whatever you
Aw.
need, email me, and so a lot of them do, and at different points in their life and their career trajectory, certain things start to make sense for them. And that's great. That's really what I want them to know, is like, oh, I don't know enough about this contract. I need to get a lawyer, or I should get some advice on this. Like, not being afraid to ask for help is super important. Like, because I think, and I say that, I don't say failure, because like the first assignment they do in my class is talk about a time where they had success or achievement or failure, you know, and they realize right away that their failures are a lot more interesting than their successes, and taught them
Oh,
much
wow.
more. Yeah. So that the idea that this is an experimental lab, an incubator, that is totally devoid of anything that they might feel in their everyday lives, of having, as we all are as perfectionists and as musicians, wanting to put our best foot forward, and that they're still in that phase of realizing that perfection is something we strive for but never achieve. And so it's like
Mm,
giving them permission, like, we're gonna play and have fun and do different things, and you're not gonna have these skills necessarily. I find that instrumentalists are very, for the most part, not very interested in talking. And so there are
okay.
no papers in my class. I don't have time to read any of them anyway, but there are no papers in my class because I really want them to talk. That's the outcome I want for them, is to be able to speak, to advocate for themselves, for the art,
Yes.
for the industry, and to be able to speak in that way, I think is really important. And that's the kind of the feedback that I get, is that they have a different confidence leaving than they had coming in. And I think also I see each class get really tight and very psychologically safe. And so it's a place where they can
Oh yeah.
talk about all of these things that are like, yeah, why is it done that way? So they can
Hmm.
kind of start to play around with innovation in a way that they can't really do anywhere else.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And we also see that in our groups, people get, once there's safety in the room, then people can really be vulnerable and share and learn from one another. I love the environment you're creating. Can you talk about the negotiation simulations and how you set those up? And some of the, maybe if you have any fun stories about something someone learned in them.
So the negotiation simulation is actually a Harvard simulation that they designed, called Sally Soprano. And
Sally Soprano?
yeah,
Okay, I love it.
and I generally have them break up in either groups of two or four. And so there's Sally Soprano and her manager, and then the lyric opera theater. They're kind of artistic and CEO, and if it's a group of four, and they have information about each other's needs and interests and positions. They then have to go and prepare and then negotiate a deal, which basically is a term sheet, right? Like, what are the things that you agree to? And I give them parameters of like, you need to agree on her salary but other than that, everything else is up for grabs, and they're like, where is she from? It's like, where is she from? I don't know. You get to decide. So they do come up with amazing things. And some of it depends on the guests that I've had in class. But I remember Ben Spalter, who's Yannick Nézet-Séguin's, like, he's his kind of artistic manager in a way. He runs his whole business. He came to speak to the class once, and he was saying,
Cool.
the bands, and I think I can't remember if it's like Ozzy Osbourne, or they always had this contract that had blue M&Ms had to be in the dressing room. And and he said to them, it's not because they need blue M&Ms in the dressing room. It's because they want to make sure that the presenter is reading the contract and that
Yeah.
all their needs will be met. And so, they take that, and so sometimes it's like no lilies in the dressing room because Sally Soprano is extremely allergic.
I love that. Yeah.
One was the
No
blue,
lilies,
yeah,
because
no
there's an
lilies.
abundance of flowers in my dressing room at all times.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
really get into it. One was the blue parrot clause, which really was the most funny. Sally Soprano had a parrot, and they had to allow her to have this emotional parrot in her dressing
Oh,
room.
oh man, that's so great.
I think the thing, though, that they take away from that is that they are negotiating a contract that at some point they will be doing themselves, right? For
Hmm.
themselves.
Hmm.
And the fact that they're doing it, um, and really they have to do a press release announcing this
Oh,
deal. Yeah. So the fact that they do it, and it's not for them personally yet, the reflection on the assignment is, you know, I thought this would be so much scarier. I thought that I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to advocate. But because I could advocate for Sally, not myself, it
that's
was
interesting.
so easy for me to think about. And I learned, like, oh, I should slow down. I don't have to answer right away. They really do learn a lot about themselves as, like, when they get agitated and having to speak again. So they get a lot out of that. That's the first kind of the time that they probably thought about, actually, how do we get to this contract phase? And then
Mm,
when I debrief the project, I show them the range of deals that the whole class got. And I go through kind of, so they see, oh my God, somebody got this
possibilities.
salary and somebody got
Yeah.
this, but actually the aggregate of the deals are fairly similar. There
Hmm.
are a few outliers here and there, but the way people go about thinking about value is how they interpreted Sally's or the lyric opera's needs and their value needs. So
This is
interest.
fascinating. So interesting. Be able to see also the possibilities of what other people could have thought of to negotiate. What would you say to like our musicians listening who are afraid of negotiation because if you ask for, let's say, a higher rate and the other person they say no, they can replace you because there are so many pianists, let's say. How can you put yourself in a mindset of there's a possibility here. We're going to negotiate and see what's better rather than thinking, because we've heard so many times, look, I can't ask for more money. They'll just get someone else.
Yeah. I think that's the crux of the issue, isn't it? Um, I think that when artists know their value and they know their unique differentiator, or we might say unique value proposition, what they're bringing to wherever they're going, whether it's soloing or teaching artistry or working on a gig. And let's put working on a gig, let's put a pin in that for a second. When it's a personal contract that you're negotiating yourself, presumably the approach to that is with your value in mind, and the person that you're making the contract with, their value in mind. So everybody wants to get a deal, everybody wants to work together. And so the process of asking for what you need, or asking for something that the other person says, I cannot meet you on that, or, you know, can you explain how you got to that number? And is there any other things that you're willing to negotiate with? Trying to open the box of tools that you have. So whether it's, okay, maybe you are not getting paid the amount that you want, the wage that you want, but perhaps they're going to provide free airfare, or perhaps they were going to provide cartage for your instruments. What are the
Mm-hmm.
things that you value? Um, Perhaps they're going to provide free social media content. Like they're going to, so are you getting the wealth of their network online as you build yours? So there's different ways to think about value, and value isn't always money. It could be reputation. You need bigger network. So somebody's contacts, or um, uh, knowing that maybe you came in a little bit under than what you may have felt that your value was. That, as long as that's a decision you made knowingly, and I'm a person who believes in no matter what, providing more value than I think somebody actually paid for. And the reason for that is because word of mouth is 12 times more powerful than any advertisement, anything that you could say about yourself on social media. And so when somebody
Yes.
says, I worked with this amazing clarinet player and she was terrific, that means more from coming from them than anything I could say. So when you leave somebody happy and thinking, oh, this was a wonderful experience, then, maybe they'll invite you back. You might say, my rates have gone up a little bit. Are you able to meet me here? Is this negotiable? I think people are afraid to ask those questions because they're afraid that they'll be turned away immediately. And I think when
Right.
it's a curiosity, is there room here? Then it signals to the other person, you know, I have value and I am value. So then they get to say, unfortunately, this is our budget, but tell us what you're thinking. And so, then it's a conversation, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really what you want. You don't want somebody to shut you down. I think that's what people are afraid of. But generally, when you make demands, again, that's sort of that positional bargaining piece. When you say, I have to get this, then people say, we can't do it. And they turn
Mm-hmm.
off. Right. So it's
Mm-hmm.
about keeping the conversation going, and finding value when you listen very closely to what they're saying. And you might say, you know what, I can do a masterclass for those group of kids that you're going to have there during that weekend. I hear you saying you're going to have this, school come visit. I'm really great with fifth graders. I'm not. But like that, maybe that's something you can provide. So when you listen to what they are doing and where their
Mm.
interests are, maybe you can provide something else. And then they go, oh yeah, well then we could pay you to do that class. So when you kind of listen to the underlying interests, they're not always clear. So you really have to kind of what I call active listen or trampoline listening, really like bounce it back and forth and have a curiosity. Don't shut down right away.
That's fantastic advice. I love that. The art of thinking impossibility, seeing how else you can serve, giving extra value because you will get that back eventually. Reciprocity effect. These are all
Yes.
great tools that you're using. We also believe in giving a lot of value, but I didn't like connect it with like the word of mouth piece. Of course, we know word of mouth is so helpful for bringing people into our world. Um, what else have you noticed your students leaving with after they've taken your, not just the negotiations, but is there anything else that you guys play out in real life?
Uh, yeah, I do a lot of like I'm a big believer in icebreakers. So we do a lot of games, and so one of the things that I do before we talk about communication and sort of how they communicate, what their communication tendencies are, is they have to line up in the room in order of birthday without
Okay.
saying a word.
Oh, what? Okay, that's so fun.
And they can ask me questions, but that's it. And
They
they
can ask
eventually
you
get it.
questions.
Yeah, they eventually
Okay,
get it.
okay.
Um, and then another one that we do, and this is all kind of putting their body too in
Mm-hmm,
the space and getting
mm-hmm.
them to actually move around. So another kind of warm up exercise I do is that we stand there in a circle and everybody has to look at two different people and they have to stay equidistant between those two people. And if you remember your geometry, that can be many different places. So when we start moving around, then it becomes this like really chaotic, space of people moving around until it finally settles. And it's a very interesting experience because I think they start to understand, oh, it's a complex adaptive world, right? And I'm focusing on these two people, but somebody else was focusing on me. And if I moved over here, that moved the whole room around.
Wow.
And, you know, things start to happen. They start to feel that one thing can set off something, but they're not in control of everything too. But it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It can be this like with they're giggling and bumping into each other, and they kind of are feeling that in their bodies. And then the next thing I do is something that's called forum theater. It's also known
Yes.
as theater of the oppressed. And it's a sort of improv theater, do it's a whole class. And we identify issues in the industry. And then they sort of we kind of uprank those issues to like four issues. And then they select which issue they want to work on. And they have about 10 minutes to come up with a skit and then they act it out. And the idea of this is it's really a South American. I can give you the resources at the end, but it's something that was kind of a healing tool during authoritarian regimes or coming out of that, where people got to kind of like work through. So it's kind of a democratic way of giving everybody a voice and also thinking about interventions into the system. So they've already had
Mm.
all of these complex systems and they see that these happen. And foreign theater is about really empowering them. So they come up with a skit, they act out the skit in front of the class. They feel so silly doing it. And it's really fun. I think they start to get comfortable. They're in a safe space. Then what happens is the people who are watching, they're called spectators. So they're spectating, but then somebody can tap in and they
Mm.
restart the skit and this person is supposed to intervene in the system and they're supposed to actually do something that can be helpful and
Mm-hmm.
it usually works. Sometimes they don't know, right? These are problems that are so entrenched in the industry that they're not thinking. So I do it later on in the semester when they're already starting that we've done a design thinking sprint in one class where they need to seek wild and unusual ideas and strive for quantity, nothing, say no to nothing, so that they can be really kind of ridiculous. And the idea is that they're seeing that they can intervene in the system and
Yes.
that in doing so, they're empowering themselves
Mm-hmm.
in that process. So then we take those problems and then we start to actually work on them as of the final project for the last month of the class.
It's incredible that you're using creative play to teach these really valuable, important lessons. Like, I think that geometry exercise is also just teaching empathy because they have to think about other people and how they might be feeling in that moment, having to move around. And again, coming back to giving them the power to speak, you have a voice to be used in the industry. So, what problems do you see? There's so much ownership that you're teaching them in a seemingly simple exercise.
Yeah.
What are some of the problems that they're coming up with for the skits?
Sometimes it's no higher auditions.
Okay.
Sometimes it's um, body shaming. Sometimes it's the audition itself. Like
Mm-hmm.
it does it do anything? Does it show you anything? Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes one year what we did, there was one that was interesting that was the DMA graduate versus the kind of soloist getting hired at a university. So they did the actual like interview of these two different types of trained musicians. And that was really interesting. One was about artistic, like talking to people about classical music and using a lot of jargon words. And so they
Yeah.
spoke completely in like music jargon for the whole time. And people were like, so they acted that out. And it's
Oh, that's so
supposed to
fun.
be like when you read the theory of this and it's supposed to be a bit over the top, it's supposed to be a bit overemphasized. Yeah,
Exaggerated. Yeah.
exaggerated. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. So that it is supposed to kind of feel so ridiculous that then some small intervention can kind of bring the level down. So sometimes it's about feeling that their teachers or the faculty are not speaking the same language as them. So,
Mm-hmm.
but they feel safe enough to do that in the room
It's
at
amazing.
this point. So, and then that can morph into, for example, is the Master of Music degree, what we call it here in the US, or Bachelor of Art, is that degree transferable? You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
d- can they go on and do something else even with
Mm-hmm.
that degree? And are they a failure if they do?
Mm.
And
Oh boy.
a lot of times, the one really interesting one, they were like convinced the degree was just a piece of worthless garbage. And by the end, they were like, "Did you know we had a career services office here? Like, and you can go." And they, understood absolutely this degree is transferable to anything that you do. In fact, the World Economic Forum just said like all of the skills that employers want to see in 2030, you're getting them all in music education. So
Wow.
yeah, they kind of sometimes their minds are really changed because they go through that process. So they have to interview some stakeholders. I connect them with people in the industry. Um, I'm thinking about trying to actually make it even more where they get a mentor through this month who is not just a stakeholder but can help them really pass some ideas around. But the thing that's really great about doing the foreign theater and acting first is they get to play around with the problems. And sometimes they don't like that problem. We're working on it. So I
Mm-hmm.
always have them self-select into their final project. And
Okay.
so that, because then they'll work for it and
Mm.
they're
Mm-hmm.
accountable to each other. So we give them, they do, a strengths assessment at the beginning of the semester and a conflicts assessment and a communication assessment. So we give all that information back to them once they form these groups so that they can really think about the group dynamics and then how they show up in that group. And, but the understanding is that everybody cares about that issue and everybody
Mm-hmm.
wants to see some sort of resolution or some sort of change. And so they're all on the same page of trying to get to that. And that's what makes it a really powerful project for them.
It's incredible how many skills and tools you're giving them in these open environments within the classroom. I'm hearing so many possibilities and thinking, oh yeah, this is so great for when they'll be in that situation later. That you've taught them not just given them the information or told them this is how it works or from your own experience and authority, but you're letting them learn, and that's just incredible. If you had to choose one thing that these kids know finishing your class that you wish your colleagues knew, do you know what that would be?
Oh, I think that it would be, and this is from my perspective in the orchestra world, the idea is like you get a job and you get tenure and you're set for life. And for a lot of musicians, that's not enough. They get to, I get so much joy from performing, and every time I perform, I also need to use the other parts of my brain too. And so it's never too late to keep upskilling yourself, to keep thinking about what lights me up, where is my energy, what brings me joy. A person I routinely bring into my class is a colleague of mine who's a violist in the orchestra, Zoe Martin Doike, and she went to go get her accounting certificate or like degree during COVID, and she still does do like tax prep and helps musicians. And I love bringing her in because she's a musician who understands the accounting live that
God
musicians
bless
have to.
her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We
And so
need more of her.
exactly. Like you can always keep upskilling. Like it's never over, right? You get a job or you have your freelance career, you can still keep learning and applying and doing things and advocating for art in the very best ways that you know how to do, that only you know how to do. So keep getting education, I think I would say. And
Mm.
there are many, many avenues for that. And I can give you lots of resources too.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be wonderful. This has been such an inspiring conversation. Thank you for all of the ideas that you've shared, the wisdom that you've shared. I just fully agree with everything you've been talking about, what you're teaching in your class. I think it's incredible to train the next generation, but also the people around us. Because I know from experience that when we can think in vision and when we think in big ideas and possibilities, it inspires other people to say, oh, wait, like it doesn't have to be what we've been told. So yeah, thank you for being an example for that.
My
If you had an
pleasure.
action point for our listeners today, one thing they can do after listening to you today.
Let's see. If you're interested in negotiation or learning more about that, Getting to Yes is an incredible book. Um, if you are interested in thinking more about your value, your kind of unique value proposition, how you think about what you charge, or maybe you're in that period where you want to raise your rates, there's a terrific book called Name Your Price by Kate
Hmm.
Dixon,
Okay.
she's a friend of mine. So I had, but
Oh,
the transparency, but I highly
perfect.
recommend it because it's for freelancers and consultants, kind of just thinking about how you actually yourself provide customer service and how you deal with your students or clients or whoever. I
That's a good one.
find, yeah, a lot of people get tangled in that. They're afraid, like you said, to kind of ask for more. So just kind of thinking about what are your own policies, your own HR kind of values and things. So that's a terrific book. And I would say that there's another resource called Navigate Well. It's by my very dear colleague, Susan Eldridge, and the Arts Collective in Australia. You can download it, it's a free
Mm.
PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And Springboard for the Arts is another one that's a fiscal sponsor organization in Minnesota. And they provide a really great career resource for anybody who's sort of kind of trying to work through all of these layers. I think that just sometimes sitting down and writing it out is so important, to kind of just pulling out of your head what's important to you. And like
Yeah,
not your teacher, not your parents, not your spouse, partner, whomever, friend who's also a violinist, right? But you yourself, and really connecting to that. Sometimes hand to paper is good. So,
absolutely. Thank you. That's wonderful advice. Definitely going to put those resources in the show notes for everybody listening. Jessica, how can we find you, follow you? What's the best way to keep in touch?
oh my goodness. Okay. I think LinkedIn is probably the easiest thing for me right now. I did tell my class I tend to answer more LinkedIn messages, but you probably reached out to me on Instagram, I think, right? And
Yes, and then you
yes,
didn't answer, so then I found you on LinkedIn.
there
And
you
then you
go.
answered immediately. And I was so grateful because I mean, I just cold wrote you and I was
Yes.
like, she's never gonna have time to meet. And then it was just such a wonderful conversation that we had
It was a
and it
fun
was
snowy
just,
day,
yeah, very
wasn't it?
inspiring.
I really
Yeah,
remember it.
yeah.
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the place where I do answer those messages because I love, when people say like write and have an ask. then I answer there. I am on Instagram. I think I'm Jessica Phillips Clarinet on Instagram. I really had to go off Instagram to get my MBA complete. But I am
Yep,
on LinkedIn.
I get that.
That's the place to find me, and we can put that in the show notes as well. And I'm also at jessicaphillipsclary.net. That's my website. Yes,
I
I
love it.
know, how cheeky. And my you can contact me through my website too.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for
It's been a
having me.
pleasure.
This has been so much fun.
Okay, everybody, make sure you share this to your stories and go check out Jessica's LinkedIn, and we'll see you in the next episode. Be fearless.